Welcome to the Booktopia podcast. I'm Sarah McDuling, Kids and YA Category Manager at Booktopia, and I am pretty much over the moon to be talking today with bestselling author Lynette Noni about her soon-to-be published book, The Gilded Cage. Lynette, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
Now, before we get into it, we should probably just telegraph early on for people listening that we may probably, very well, likely, slip some spoilers in for book one, The Prison Healer. I think it's really hard to discuss book two without letting some information slip from book one. So if you're a person who doesn't like to be spoiled and you haven't yet read The Prison Healer, just consider yourself warned. With that said, for everyone listening, could you just tell them a little bit about The Gilded Cage and what they can expect in this book?
Oh, okay. So in The Prison Healer, we follow a 17-year-old girl who's been locked in a death prison for 10 years, and then she's suddenly given the chance to earn her freedom, and the cost could be her very life. Now, we learn at the end of that book that the cost wasn't her very life. She managed to survive these impossible magical trials, and she's managed to now we're entering complete spoiler territory because I can't really talk about the second book without this part, but she's now managed to escape the prison. So the opening of The Gilded Cage is a couple of weeks after the end of The Prison Healer. She's been out in the real world for a few weeks, and she's finally found her way to the capital city called Valenia, and she's there, and another... it is actually really hard to talk about this book without spoiling the first book. So for anyone listening, really, truly stop listening if you haven't read the first book. But so she's staying at the palace with the royal family. And so in her mind, she's desperate to find her family, who she hasn't seen for 10 years. But she also has this problem where she is, everything she's learned from the first book, everything we've learned about her, she now has this dual nature of wanting to find her family and wanting this vengeance for all this horrible stuff that's happened to her, while also slowly falling in love with the people who she's meant to hate. And so the entirety of this book is her trying to figure out what to do and what is right and what is wrong. And if the first book was about Kiva learning to trust other people and letting people into her life, this book is about her learning to trust herself and to trust her instincts and to make decisions that leave her in really, really horrible, challenging situations where really no one can kind of win, and she just has to decide what is the best outcome. So that's probably the vaguest way I can explain this book. Her overarching mission is to find her family, to connect with them, and to decide what to do. That sounds so like a nothing book. There's a lot of political problems that happen in this book. There's a lot of we learn towards the end of The Prison Healer that Kiva herself has magic, and she's having some problems with that in this second book because it is starting to burst out of her uncontrollably, and absolutely no one can learn that she has magic. It's like a death sentence. So she's trying to hide that and learn to control that. So all these little things all become this one book that I can't tell you anything about.
In case anyone listening to that thought it sounded like, and I'm quoting you directly, a nothing book, I can attest, having read it, it's definitely not a nothing book. So much goes on in this book. It is incredibly rich and juicy and full of all of the emotions.
Oh, thank you.
When you were last time, I guess, on the podcast to talk about The Prison Healer, we spoke about how challenging and sort of difficult it is to write plot twists when you're writing in the first person and the main character is the one holding the secrets. In this book, Kiva, as you said, a spoiler for book one, her cards are on the table now with the reader. She has revealed her secrets to the reader, but she has not revealed them to all of the other characters. So now you set yourself this challenge of writing an entire book where the main character is put in this position of having to kind of deceive. Was that as challenging for you as the challenge you set yourself in book one?
it was a different kind of challenge because by this stage I've fallen in love with the characters, and so I'm just like, just communicate with each other, like I just wanted to scream at them and be like, just trust them with your secrets, it'll be okay. And then I'm like, well, actually it may not be okay, so I can see why you're not trusting them with your secrets. And it's really complicated and it was really hard, and I went into this book having to into writing this book with a lot of questions. Like my initial gut instinct, I actually know that's not true. My not my gut instinct, because I would have gone with it if it was. My thought was I should have like a problematic royal family who are not good people, and so it's really easy to hold secrets from them because you don't want them to know these things. But as I was writing it, I was like, I don't think that's what these people are. I think they are actually good people who do good, the best that they can do. And that just added another challenge for Kiva, because then she's got the question of, why would I be trying to bring down this family who is actually, not doing all that, anything really terrible, except what they've done to me personally. And so how do I justify my own actions? And so a lot of that, it was really hard to maintain her secrets. And there are times when Kiva, where you kind of feel like, she's really struggling with not telling people. And especially as certain people, as, like Jaren, who is the love interest who we learn in the first book, as he starts to tell her his secrets, and she's learning all this stuff about him that's really, really dangerous. And she's just holding her in secrets back the whole time. Part of the time I just wanted to shake her. And I know that's crazy because I wrote her, so I could have at any point, made her reveal these secrets. But at the same time, there is a lot riding on her secrets. They are treasonous secrets, and they have a death sentence if they go to the wrong person at the wrong time. And so, there really is a lot that she's dealing with. And at the end of the day, I also had to try and keep in mind that she's 17 years old and she's been locked up since she was 7. She has no idea how to handle any of this. She might be really worldly in some ways, in survival instincts and in having managed to live through some horrific circumstances, but she has no outside knowledge of how to handle real life. So her having to deal with all of that and the emotional turmoil of it, it was really hard to hold those secrets, especially, as you said, as the reader, we know. And so then it was also, I guess that therefore made it a challenge for me. I read a book recently, so it wasn't my book, but there was recently a book that I read, and within the first couple of chapters, I when you can just figure out what the secret is, and yeah. It started to just bug me, and I was like, just hurry up and reveal it on page, because we know as readers what it is, so just make it clear what it is. And so my problem coming into the Gilded Cage was knowing that readers already know, and knowing that the other characters don't know, so trying to not make it annoying for readers until they reach that point where everyone knows. So that was difficult, and I hope I pulled that off, but we'll see.
Well, no, this is why I bring it up, because I'm kind of in awe of the way you did nail that. It's funny that you said you felt like shaking Kiva, because, I mean, as a reader, so did I, but ordinarily when this kind of thing happens in a book and their main character is deceiving people, it's common, as in a lot of romances, because the complication is often secrets being held, and I find it really difficult, because when I get to that point where I want to shake the character, I often feel frustrated because their reasons for holding the secret don't feel enough. And so therefore all of their actions just feel annoying. And I never, like, you walked this razor thin line with Kiva, because I never didn't understand why she was still holding the secret. Like, it always felt, yeah, in that position, I'd hold it too, but I wish she wouldn't. And like, yeah. Like having those two things at war with each other through the whole book is really the meat of this story, and you did it so well.
I think it comes back to the fact that, like, I mean, as a reader of these books, even though I wrote them, I think it does come back to the fact that we care so much about the other characters, and that's why we want her to tell them, so that everyone can be happy and holding hands, and it's rainbows and sunshines, and that's why you want to shake her and tell her to just tell them and trust them and that it'll be okay. But again, there's that little voice that's like, but will they handle it? This is not a good secret to have. And so yeah, it's tough to read and tough to write, and just from the writing perspective, I just had to, it was almost like and I know these secrets that we're talking about weren't, really in line with the romance, but it was like I had to make it a slow burn secret reveal instead of a slow burn romance. So there's that as well, because I knew that if there's a time and a place for everything, and this secret, it couldn't be revealed until its right time, and that I knew I was building up to that. But the journey is painful.
But like deliciously painful. It's so good. It's such a good read. I didn't actually think it would be possible for you to like destroy me as a reader the way you did in book 1 in book 2, but you did it. So I guess my question, Lynette Noni, is, are you trying to kill me?
Well, I mean, if it makes you feel any better, this isn't going to make you feel any better. But so the first 2 books, they are set like the first book in particular is set in a death prison. It's quite dark. There are triggering themes, and yet there's nothing that's so triggering that we thought we needed a trigger warning or anything on the book. They're everywhere online, but the book doesn't need that. The Gilded Cage is a little bit lighter purely because it is set outside of this horrible nightmare death place. There are still, a lot of more mature themes, but it's not like constant fear of anything horrible happening to you, except for all those secrets coming out and the problems that come with that. Where I'm going with this is to make you feel better, which won't make you feel better at all. But I've just finished writing and editing The Blood Trader, which is the 3rd book in the series, and I've actually added my own trigger warning at the beginning of that book, purely because the themes, especially the mental and emotional themes that the main character, especially Kiva, has to go through, but a lot of the characters, it's just I wanted to take a little bit of extra care, given certain elements that happen in the Gilded Cage, that people know going into it that, okay, cool, we've had a rough journey to get here, but it's got to get a little bit worse before it gets a little bit better. So, that's that. To answer your question of if I want to destroy my readers, no, but I want them to feel what the characters go through, and then I want to bring all readers into good places as well. That sounds so like la la la, let's hug. But I just mean, like, even in the prison hill, the whole point was, in this dark, horrible place, there are still moments of light and there are still moments of hope. So I still want that in all the other books as well. But yes, I don't want to like destroy anyone, but I want you to feel connected to the books and for them to, I guess, be memorable enough that you have these moments where you can say, yeah, I hate you, but I loved it, but I still hate you.
Yeah, like, how dare you? But
Yeah,
also,
exactly.
Can I have some more, please? Yeah.
Right now. I need it right now.
Yeah, well, mission accomplished, because I feel like that's definitely what you've done. There are a great cast of new characters in book 2, or in some cases, characters we've briefly seen in book 1 that are getting a bit more of a spotlight in book 2. So I wondered if you could just sort of give listeners a taste of who they will be meeting in this book. In particular, my favourite, who is Calden.
Oh, Calden's my favorite too. So we meet Calden in the first book. We kind of don't know that he is Calden. He's masquerading as Prince Devrick, who he is not. But so we meet him briefly in the infirmary, and he's just this kind of cavalier, rogue, flirt kind of. Kiva is not impressed. Let's just, she's just like, dude, stop, get away from me. She doesn't say it like that. That's contemporary speak for how she would have spoken.
The vibe.
Yeah. So Calden came crashing into the second book, quite literally, I think in the first chapter or second chapter. And I won't say why or how, but he, Kiva still has quite a low opinion of this guy. And mostly because she is trying to distance herself from the royal family. Like she has a very good reason to not want to like any of them. And so, it's hard enough that Jaren's managed to wiggle his way into her heart. And so she won't let anyone else do that. But Calden is like this little fungus, and he's so impossible not to like, because he's a character who he is just blatantly himself. Like he's flirtatious, but then he'll do this 180 and he'll just see that he's so smart and he's so cunning and he's so switched on, but then he'll go back to this really lighthearted banter kind of, I don't care about anything. And so it kind of leaves Kiva on her toes about who he is, and therefore leaves readers kind of wondering it too. And then you find out this like backstory to him that kind of makes you realize, okay, he's got a few more dimensions to him than I thought he did. He's not just this shallow princely poncy guy. He's, you know, there is depth here. And so I really enjoyed fleshing out his character. I really enjoyed growing the friendship between him and Kiva. I just thought it was there's such a purity to their friendship that is completely platonic and just so just supportive and encouraging. And, you know, obviously for a long time, it's very reluctant on Kiva's part, but it's clear that, you know, he is really not going to let her not be his friend kind of thing. So he's probably honestly my favorite character, definitely of the series and possibly that I've ever written. Like, he's just very special to me. But other characters, you know, you start to meet Kiva's family, her brother Terrell and her sister Zalika, and so I really enjoyed meeting them. And I say that because they're not in the first book at all. I had no idea what their characters would kind of be like. I really love her brother. He's so protective. He's so caring. And her sister is really prickly and she's had a really hard life. And she's, you know, like almost the opposite of the brother, which is really interesting because they both grew up in the same situation, you know, together for those 10 years that Kiva wasn't with them, and to see their natures be so different, but to see that they both have such big hearts in different ways. So they were also really fun to meet. The royal family in general, Jaren's parents, you get to know his sister a bit more as well. There's another healer who Kiva meets, her name's Lucinda, and Kiva meets her at Silverthorn Academy, which we also meet in this book. It's a healing academy where Kiva gets to sort of dip her toes in and out a little bit. She's not studying there, but she gets to sort of visit a bit and maybe steal a few things if she might need use of their medicines for certain things. So yeah, there's quite a few new characters, but they're also really quite limited as well. There's only two new main characters, and that would be Calden, who we spoke about, and Racinda, but she has more of a minor main role, same as the brother and sister, minor main roles, if that makes sense.
I was obsessed with Calden by the end of, very early, probably in Gilded Cage, to be honest. He was like the breakout star of this book. And part of the reason I really loved him, like, you've made him very charming and very lovable, so that's why I love him. But also just from a tactical point of view, I love the way his character, you know, when you're reading a YA fantasy trilogy and an extremely charming, roguish character shows up, we are trained from like the tropes we see so often to immediately think love triangle. And instead we get to watch this beautiful friendship develop between them that is just 100% platonic, and really like it's friendship goals, like in terms of writing a developing friendship that's really interesting and as you said, happening completely against Kiva's will. So like, I just wondered, in your creation of the character, were you intentionally trying to kind of set up that expectation and subvert the love triangle angle?
I mean, I guess I was intentional in the way I knew that it would never become a love triangle. I don't love love triangles. They kind of, I'm just not a big fan of reading them. They stress me out a little bit. I always, you always know who's going to be the person that the person ends up with. And if you end up starting to like both of them, then someone ends up losing and you always feel bad for that person. But most of the time, it's just annoying, unnecessary angst while you're waiting for it to happen. And it also can drown out the actual important adventure of whatever story you're reading, because it can kind of eclipse everything. And then that's like, well, what's happening to the actual saving of the world if you're talking about a book that's like that? And if it's just a general contemporary one, it just then also just becomes the whole plot and you're just waiting for them to just figure out what you already know is going to happen. So hurry up and get there. I obviously have very strong feelings about love triangles. So I knew obviously in my mind that it was never going to become that. There may have been a moment where I could have thought about it. There is a scene, I don't want to give any spoilers, but there's a scene where Kiva does something that really upsets Calden, justifiably really upsets Calden, and she knows that she went too far and she goes to apologize to him and they have a bit of a moment. But, it's not a romantic moment at all. And I remember after I'd written that non-romantic moment, I thought, if I wanted to turn this into something, this is where I would start to guide it in another direction. And I was like, this is just too beautiful what they have. This is just this relationship. It is so healthy. It is so so important for me to write, but for people to read and to know that it's okay to have these relationships that are never going to become romantic. And that's part of life. I hope most of us have friends that we're never going to, it's not even going to cross our minds. And if it does, it's like, don't stop. And so with Calden, the other aspect to it is Kiva's heart is already claimed by someone else, even if she's fighting it with every part of who she is, even if she's denying it, like there is no room left for her to be in love with someone else when she's trying so hard to not be in love with the person who she is in love with. So, she doesn't have room, I guess. She doesn't need an extra challenge of loving two people in that way. And I think Calden himself, he would never, he doesn't look at Kiva like that. Like she's more like an annoying baby sister, even though he's not that much older than her, but he just kind of just, pat on the head kind of friendship. Like, it's okay, you'll get through this, you'll be fine, or actually he also doesn't hold back from yelling at her and getting angry at her when she does something like wrong and bad. Like he'll keep her in check, and I think that's also important too. So I could go on for hours about how much I love this character in a way that's a bit weird, because it's like I'm fangirling on my own character, but he just came alive, and he just really threw himself into my path in a way, and I say that knowing even more than you do, because I know what happens in the third book, and it's just I just love him. And so I love that he doesn't have a love triangle. I love that Kiva and he are just so Kiva and Calden, and that's kind of it.
It's a joy. It's a joy of this book, because the book is deeply romantic. And I think when you write a book that is as deeply romantic as these two books are, platonic friendships can often be sidelined. So in this book, completely not. I feel like the care and the emotional payoff of the relationship between Calden and Kiva is just as dramatic and propulsive through the story as the romance is. And that just doesn't happen that often.
I think, even thinking of it now that you've said that, she probably has just as much on screen, on page time with Calden as she does with Jaren. So, it's like two very different relationships, but both are such a focus. And then of course we have like Tip, who's another different kind of relationship, and obviously he's 11, so that's not going to be a romantic relationship, but and then we have her with Racinda, who's a new female friend, and Nari, of course. Nari. When the first book it's interesting to write her from a different perspective now too, because now that they're out of the prison, Nari has, she has a job, and her job is to protect Jaren, and so following that, so knowing that Nari can't just be a friend who can hang out and have fun times, Nari's there, so it was writing all these they're all different relationships, and I think that really helped amplify each of those relationships, because they were all so unique, and it really was a joy to write, and I really enjoyed that.
Well, 100% a joy to read. You've given your readers actually a real treat in the schedule of this series, in releasing the books so quickly. You're so good to us. I'm especially thankful, because I don't deal that well with agonizing cliffhangers, and you are proving yourself to be the high empress of agonizing cliffhangers. So I just wondered, what has it been like for you in terms of the pressure of turning these books around so quickly, and also, as a sub-question, when can we expect book 3?
Well, sub-question answered is, I believe, The Blood Trader, which is the final book, I believe it's coming out in June next year, so 8 months from now. I'm not sure if that's penciled in or not. I was kind of early on told it would be 6 months, so anywhere between 6 to 8 months, but everything online is saying June, so I don't want to tell you 6 months in case it has been changed to June. And that could purely just be a scheduling thing, so it doesn't clash with other books that are coming out at certain times. I don't really I don't really get clued in on the logistics of how a specific release date is chosen. I know that the book is, it's written, it's just completed its second round of edits, so it's basically done now. It just has the final couple of rounds of minor like copy editing and proofreading to go, which is very exciting. And then the baby's just, it just does its marketing thing and it just sits and waits until it's printed. So it's usually like a 6-month gap of a book being completely done before it actually goes out. And it's always a really weird time because I move on to something and then 6 months later, I suddenly have to remember what I'm promoting. And I, like now with the Gilded Cage, like I finished writing this book, I don't know, a year ago and finished editing and everything at the beginning of this year. And now it's like, oh, what is the book about? Right, now I need to talk about that. So yes, let's say June next year for the release. But if that changes and it's earlier, I will certainly be letting people know. And as for what the pressure was like, that was a challenge. And that was a challenge that was amplified because of COVID and the pandemic and everything, which no one could have predicted when I signed on to have these as an accelerated release. Because I got all these publishing offers at the end of 2019, and obviously, the world hadn't stopped at that point. And so it's been, there's been a lot of mental and emotional challenges with that. The physical challenges, I got really sick, and it's been hard, and the deadlines have been really hard and really, really tight, and especially coming in. I mean, I thought writing the second book was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do in my life, in my career. But it does not it doesn't begin to compare to the third book and everything in that book, which I think is also partly why I wrote the trigger warning at the beginning of the book, is because I had to delve into some really dark places to create that book, given certain things that happen in the second book, and that was a really hard place for me to be in mentally, and I knew that if it was affecting me that much, it might affect readers that much. And so I don't want to scare anyone off it. It's fine. It's still YA. It's still if you get to the point that you've enjoyed the series enough to want to read the third book, you'll be totally fine with it. It's nothing outside of that realm. And it's actually probably a lot less than some of the stuff that you've seen in the first book. It's just a different kind of whew, this hits me in the feels kind of thing.
Oh, gosh.
But you also move past it, reasonably quickly. So it's all fine. But that was really a hard place to write from, because you might read a really difficult scene in 10 minutes, but it might take me days to write that scene, and I have to stay in that headspace while that horrible thing is happening. And I have to, so that was really difficult. And plus I had a lot of life things happen. I lost my agent halfway through drafting, and then that was a big kerfuffle. And then that sounded really morbid. She's fine. I didn't lose her. We had to part ways. And so I should clarify that. And there were some problems with deadlines and just a lot of things changing. And, so it was really hard, and I don't want to sugarcoat that. I know that a lot of people will be like, oh, just buck up and tell everyone it's good and it's fine. But I know that there are writers listening to this podcast, and you need to be aware that the realities of this career are not always going to be good things. This is my dream. I love it so much, but there are some really, really hard days, and any author will tell you the same thing. So unfortunately, there were a lot more hard days this year than there have been in other years, but I'm still here, and I still, when I look back, I'm just so proud of how far I've come and what I got through and what I've produced. Really, these books are unlike anything that I've ever managed in the past as well, because I really had to do the trial by fire, so to speak. Not my elemental magical trial by fire, but the metaphorical trial by fire, in order to write them so quickly and to produce them so fast and with so few errors, because the timelines were too tight to allow for any big problems. And so I think the pressure of knowing that I had to do a good job, well, that's not true. I put that on myself, of wanting to do a good job for my readers to enjoy the books. But there was also the pressure of knowing that this is my biggest series to date. It's been sold into numerous, 13, 14, 15 other countries. It's out globally. It's just kind of there's a lot of people wanting, a good follow-up book. I need to make sure I do that. So a lot of pressures and a lot of voices I have to kind of silence in order to just focus and do it. And that's when it helps me remember that I love what I do. And that's what I have to try and just sit into that spot and remember, okay, I do this because I love it. I do it because I love these characters and I love this world and I want what's best for them, which will hopefully become on the page what people love to read as well. So we will see.
Well, I think, I mean, as you say, I think for writers to hear that is important, but I think for readers as well, because this is not something that a lot of people are able to do. It doesn't happen that often that you can get 3 books released over the course of essentially like a year, right? Or a little bit over a year. So it's and it sounds as though it was very difficult. So I think letting readers know that they're getting spoiled is a good thing. Spoiled in the other way. Spoiled as in treated very nicely, not as in spoilers. So this is kind of a cheeky question. You don't have to answer this one if you prefer not to. But you mentioned, so earlier we spoke about how book 1 is kind of a bit of it's like a survival story. It's trials that she has to undergo. Book 2 is very court intrigue. Are you able to sort of give a vague vibe on what book 3 is?
Oh, book 3. I mean, it is I'm like speechless because it is so I mean, it's so epic in a sense. There is so much adventure, there is so much pain. Like there is like emotional pain, there is so much. It really does, it almost goes back to that survival, but a different kind of survival now, and also like a way of it's almost a reckoning, I guess, after what we've learned, what we've had to get through to get to where we are, to the decisions that Kiva has had to make to then go forward into that knowledge and to burst through it into what's going to actually finish the series. It is that reckoning of figuring out who she is, what she wants, and what she's going to do about making it happen against all odds and against all adversaries. And I say that with there's a lot that even at the end of this second book, you might have ideas of what the third book could be about, and you really have no clue. Like when I wrote it and I sent it to my editors, I just had to have like a note at the beginning say, don't even bother reading the synopsis I gave you at the beginning of this series, because nothing that I wrote actually happens in this book. Everything changed. And that's purely because when I was editing the Gilded Cage, there's this one line I added to the end of the Gilded Cage, and I remember it just made me sit back and go, oh my gosh. And it's a line that so means nothing in the Gilded Cage, but in my head I was like, that is the biggest, most awful twist that I could add to any book I would ever add. And it just opened up this entire new plot line, just a really innocent line in this book. You won't even know what it is, and I'm not gonna tell you because I know you'll like agonize over what it is. But yeah, it made me realize that my entire thought process for the third book had just gone out the window, and so everything in that book is so it's just so much happens. Like at one point I was halfway through and I'm like, this might need a 4th book. Like it might go beyond a trilogy. And I was like, oh, I don't know if anyone's gonna be okay with it. Like readers I know would be okay with it, but I'm like, I'm contracted on for 3 books. I don't know how to extend that to a 4th book. And so instead, all this epic craziness ends up in one book, and it's just there is a lot of stuff that happens. So if I had to do the one word, I would say reckoning. Let's say that.
Wow, that just sounds epic. I mean, I'm out the other side of the Gilded Cage, so it's hard. I've got blinkers on for Blood Trader. All I can think about is Blood Trader. But for the readers, Gilded Cage is about to be out in the world, and they should all brace themselves for a wild ride. We've gone a little bit over time. I could keep talking to you for hours about this, honestly. But Lynette, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Thank you. It's always awesome to chat with you, Sarah.
Oh, my heart. And for everyone listening, you can grab your copy of The Gilded Cage by Lynette Noni, as well as a copy of The Prison Healer and all of Lynette Noni's amazing backlists at your local bookstore or online at Booktopia. Thank you for listening, and never stop reading.
Thank you for listening to the Booktopia podcast channel. Don't forget, you can subscribe to us on Soundcloud and iTunes for free and get access to hundreds of author discussions, book analysis pieces and more. Or, if your eyes need a workout, head to Booktopia TV on YouTube. Don't forget, for all books featured in this podcast and for access to a whole bunch of other fun content on our blog, head to Booktopia, Australia's local bookstore, at booktopia.com.au.